Okay, so let's start. I hope, hello everyone. I hope you are doing well. My name is Swapnil and I am representing Advantage Learning. It is my pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on India's power sector to curtail climate change or CCUS perspective. It is an absolute honor to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Nitesh Kumar, a highly esteemed expert with over 18 years of experience in this field. His extensive knowledge and practical insight promise to provide invaluable perspectives for today's webinar. We truly appreciate your time and participation. Our aim is to ensure this webinar is both engaging and insightful for all attendees. You are encouraged to share your questions through Q&A feature during session. We are here to ensure the productive and interactive experience for everyone. That's all from my side. Without further delay, let me hand over the session to Dr. Nitesh Kumar, sir, to begin. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you very
Yes.
much, Advantage. I will request you to. Okay, so you have already allowed me to share the screen.
Yes.
Let me quickly pull it out. Just give me 1 second. Right, so we are here. Where is Zoom? Zoom. Okay. All right. Is the presentation visible to everybody?
Yes, you can see your screen.
Yes, sir, visible.
Okay, dear. Okay. Thank you. So today we are going to talk about, you know, seeker's perspective through the lenses of power sector in India. Now, some of you would say that CCUS is applicable not just to power sector, but maybe to steel, cement, oil and gas, transportation, name it. Why only power sector is so important? The reason we have power sector here is the fact that the regulatory body for CCUS implementation and the authority with which the government of India would be implementing CCUS policy will be through the power sector itself. You all are aware that there is significant carbon footprint. We'll discuss that in a minute. There is a significant carbon footprint due to power sector in India. And so the responsibility has been given to this sector. And it is for this reason that we have Bureau of Energy Efficiency, which is within the power sector, which is kind of the steering agency for seekers in India. So we don't really have a seekers policy in place yet, but there is a draft white paper from Niti Aayog, and hopefully we should have the policy in place in the very near future. So let me start with climate change. You must have heard about polar ice caps melting. You may have heard about typhoons like Katrina and so many. There are droughts all over the world, many places. And why is all this happening? Is man doing something which is bothering the nature? And the answer seems to be yes. It's an obvious yes. And that is maybe because you have so much transportation, maybe because so much power sector emission, energy sector is emitting so much, what they call GHG, greenhouse uh, emissions. And the major amongst those emissions is carbon dioxide, right? So you drive a vehicle on Delhi, if you are from Delhi, you know the long lines of vehicles there. And imagine the amount of carbon dioxide is released. Likewise, for any industry, you want to produce electricity from, thermal power stations, coal, and or maybe a diesel generator, and the amount of CO2 is released. You all are aware of that, right? So this is what we mean from climate change. It is happening because of human intervention, and there are many scientific studies to that. And the rising carbon footprint is leading to climate change. That's what we can conclude. Now, if there is a climate change, um, the next question is, who are the polluters? So this is a data from 2023, Union of Concerned Scientists. The reference has the details of this graph. And barely 3 years ago, like 2020, this graph would have read that India was the polluter number three, which is now occupied by Russia. So there are obvious, steps taken by the government, and we can say that is in the right direction. India is still polluting. It's on the seventh position, but United States and China and the rest of the Germany, UK, these are the ones which are polluting more. Europe, together put, you know, the EU is kind of having a high contribution. So, as you can see from the chart, it is evident that the pollution is really coming from the global north, and they should take the responsibility as well in terms of emission control, carbon dioxide emission control. Does that happen? Yes, through the various international conventions, you know, uh, that has been done. That is the direction for the world leaders. But right now, I will just discuss what India has has declared in one of those conventions, which is called COP26, happened in 2021. So in COP26 convention, which was United Nations Climate Change Conference of 2021, India said that we have a decarbonization target to increase the share of electricity produced in the country through renewable sources by 50%. That's a huge target. So we are saying that by 2030, we should be able to do this, increase the renewable sources, energy from renewable sources by 50%, right? Then we are saying that achieving 500 gigawatts of fossil fuel free generating capacity by 2020. So these things don't happen in a day. There is definitely, uh, work going on, and the work is in that direction of the declaration by the Prime Minister. Then the third thing, achieve 500 gigawatts of fossil fuel free generating capacity. Of course, then the third thing is net zero. Net zero, what's the concept? We'll just discuss it. But for now, know that we want to control carbon footprint, and in that direction, net zero is great. And power sector is going to be crucial, like we discussed. And so let's talk about the thermal power generation and carbon footprint for a minute. So the picture there says it all. All the smoke and uh, CO2 being released is due to combustion, maybe of coal, maybe of oil, natural gas, and the goal is to generate electricity, right? By combustion. So what happens when you have combustion? You release carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, or and the particulate matter, which is really small. Like those who live in Delhi, they know that the air quality index has been going high and high, and recently it had crossed 500, or maybe it was up to 900 3 weeks ago or so. So with that kind of hazardous environment, life on earth for human beings would be very difficult. We are already living there in such environments. So it is important that we realize that this is not good for human being. And the most important thing is to control it ASAP. Now, what can control this? We'll talk about these technologies, but main thing is to capture this release of poisonous GHGs and carbon dioxide in particular. And there's a technology called CCUS, that is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. We'll discuss that in a minute. And this technology can be the game changer. And we are going to relate it with, power, um, power sector. All right. So earlier I talked about concept of net zero. And what is net zero? It simply means that the balance between amount of greenhouse gases that's produced and the amount that you are removing from the atmosphere. So how would you remove it? Say there's a technology called direct capture, DAC, direct air capture. So you capture the carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and then you um, you can do carbon sequestration or do something so that you can get the nature free from this CO2. So it can be achieved through a combination of emission reduction and emission removal technologies. We will discuss those technologies that seek us in a minute. But for now, just realize that net zero is the concept. You are producing as much carbon dioxide as much as you are removing it, and storing it somewhere down in the earth. I will come back to this CCUS technology in a minute. Okay. So I told you about international conventions. India has been part of it. Now we are talking about conventions like in 1992, there was a convention in Rio, which is basically forming the framework for climate change, and based on that, we had this Kyoto Protocol meeting in Japan in 1997, where we said that the international governments, mostly from the Western nations, they would be responsible to cut on emissions, and as well as support the developing nations to pay for these technologies and help them in emission control. And there is a detailed study by the US EPA on greenhouse gas emissions and how to reduce that. There's a report on it, even though US has not signed that agreement, but that report is available and it's very insightful. Then sustainable development goals from Paris Convention in 2015, net zero concept, and then IPCC, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This was started way back in 1988, and this special report on global warming from IPCC, SR 1.5, that kind of zeroes in on how you can uh, revert this climate change, or at least how we can achieve the net zero concept. And of course, this International Energy Agency's report on CCUS and clean energy transitions, September 2020, and the conference of the parties in 2021, where India gave that declaration. So there are many more conventions, and India has been part of those meetings, and the goal there has been to provide, uh, continuous and sustainable development for the economy and for the world, right? All right. So what does the IEA report says? See, it says CCUS carbon capture, utilization, and storage is the only group of technologies that contributes both to reducing emissions in sectors directly and removing carbon dioxide to balance emissions that are challenging to avoid critical part of net zero goals. So CCUS is a very key technology, guys. And if you are interested in climate change, if you are interested in making a difference in terms of climate and Mother Nature, this is the technology to understand and to implement. Okay, so that said, um, what is CCUS? So C for carbon, of course, we want to remove carbon from the atmosphere. Then capture. Capture means how would you remove it? You have to capture it somehow, right? So you first capture it. Then comes utilization. How would you utilize it? There is carbon sequestration. There is use of that carbon dioxide in fertilizers, plastics, other industries. And then there is, of course, if you can't utilize it, you can always do store it. Mother Nature has provided so many good storage areas, and this is downhole, maybe 1,000 meters or 3,000 meters below the mud line of the ocean. There may be a formation uh, which can be useful in getting the carbon dioxide in liquid form stored permanently for many, many, many years. Maybe 100, years, you're not going to uh, bring it back. And that sequestered CO2 is there permanently. It's not that it is there only for a few years and it leaks back. No. So yes, you can prevent the climate damage. We can prevent the planet. We just got one planet, guys, and this planet we must save it for our future generations. So sustainable growth, sustainable energy utilization should be everybody's goal, and that's what the governments have been trying to do. And CCUS is the technology to help us do that. Okay. Now, talking about policy here, we have the technology. CCUS technologies are there, and development is going on. Sharing is free of cost. But for developing nations, it is important that we need to have uh, the right policy framework in the nation. Like India doesn't have a CCUS policy, and this policy must be in place as soon as possible. So, what would be the policy initiatives required to implement CCUS in India? Note that there would be specific challenges in every nation. So, India has a huge population. Indian cities like New Delhi are polluted. There's significant air pollution. You go to Nigeria, maybe the coastal region is highly polluted. You go to a desert in Middle East, maybe the high temperatures are a concern. So every nation has some important concern, and those must be addressed. And we will see in terms of policy what can be useful for India. The first thing we need to realize is that your policy should be such that it addresses technologies which are going to really make a difference to the nation, right? So I talk about DAC. Why do I say that? Like we just discussed, the air quality levels in Delhi was very, very bad. And that is a challenge for the governments for the last 20 years. Every year this has been the same problem. What could be done? So direct air capture of carbon dioxide can be implemented in India. And we should really appreciate this technology. We should encourage research institutions to work more and more on DAC so that we have a technology which can be fruitful to the local needs, right? Uh, Likewise, there's something called PLI of the Government of India, production linked incentives, and the government has it under the program Atma Nirbhar Bharat, and so seekers should be put in this category of programs, which qualify for Atmanirbhar Bharat and a PLI incentive. So maybe technologies like DAC to be produced locally and by local materials and be used in in controlling carbon capture, right? So if we can do that, we would be meeting our objective. Now, the next point I have is early stage financing and funding mechanism. We will discuss this in more detail and how these tariffs can be controlled, how we can implement, carbon trade. We'll talk about it in a minute. And the government will promote the creation of pilot plants and encourage collaboration between businesses. So how can you do that? Yeah. So you can have what you call hubs or clusters, which can really be that can be provided by the government and in public private partnership, so that the money is available and the concept can be used. We'll discuss this cluster framework thing in a minute too. All right. So, like I said, institutional framework and seekers business model. Okay. So, uh, how how do you ensure that a particular policy is implemented? There must be an overseer. And like the United States showed in the 70s and 80s, you can have an independent regulator, and that regulator really controls the functioning of that particular area. So the government can set up a regulatory body to support the industry, those businesses who want to bring in CCUS technologies and implement ways to harbor, this technology. So this can be of immense help in setting up the CCUS value chain in India. And so we must have a regulatory body which will answer questions raised by the industry experts. Now, that said, we can also have the regulatory body um, respond to, to the government. So one side, it is the businesses, and the other side, it's the government. So it can be the link to make um, uh, the required changes to the policy, you know, to the policy for CCUS implementation as time goes on and as the CCUS value chain matures over time, right? So these projects of CCUS can be given preferential treatments by way of financial incentives. So, what could be a financial incentive? Say you give them a tax break, and if you say, like in the US, they would say, if you would capture 1 ton of CO2 and you sequestrate it in the hydrocarbon reservoir or a basalt reservoir, whatever reservoir mechanism you have in the country, then you get a $50 tax credit. That's a good thing, right? So if you put a 50 million ton of CO2 downhole, you get $50 million. That's a good business, right? It makes sense. So that kind of thing should be given in India. Then financing mechanism through a carbon capture finance corporation. So this is very much required in India, to coordinate the efforts by the government and international organizations. Like, there are green financial organizations who really want to invest in India because they are already operating in Europe or elsewhere, and they would like to make a place here. But the government may be very rigid in terms of policy. But if there is an independent regulator, they can talk to them and come up more openly as to what would be needed to make the sector flourish. Then government should launch carbon credit trading scheme. So this is a trading market, unified carbon market where anybody can come in and trade, just like you have SEBI controlled financial markets, yeah, the National Stock Exchange, where any company can be floated and its shares can be traded. Likewise, a carbon market would mean that you can buy and sell carbon credits. And that will really be functional, hopefully, in the near future. See, the government doesn't have a CCUS policy, but a lot of things have already been going in the backyard. So it is possible that you may not really see the the face of it yet, but then a lot of thing has already been going on there. Okay. So that's uh, let me just mute where I am. Yeah. All right. So uh, talking about the next thing, we would like to encourage a comprehensive seeker cluster framework. Now, we discussed about this cluster framework a minute ago. These are basically, hubs, like Norway has a Longship hub. And what they do is they make life easier for other businesses. The government provides some support, like providing support for transportation hub. So there is a storage hub where you will store the carbon dioxide. There's a capture hub. So there may be industry like steel or something or maybe a refinery sector where the carbon dioxide is being released and you would like to capture it there, right? And store it in a storage hub, which is basically way down below the sea floor, right? And then there is a utilization hub, like there can be an EOR process. We'll discuss that in a minute, which would help oil and gas production. And transportation. So from the storage hub, how would you transport it to the from capture hub to transport and transportation to storage, right? So this circle, how to implement this, the government can help you on that. So that is how it can be understood, in simple words. So clusters in India could be developed, and uh, this will reduce risks and cost. We'll see in a minute. By allowing industrial emitters to share carbon dioxide transport and storage. So common uh, common support systems are going to be in place for all of them. So that said, let me take you to the next slide. And so what are benefits of having a CCUS cluster framework thing? It's a shared infrastructure, guys. There can be multiple emitters, yeah, different industries, and they all are capturing the carbon dioxide, and it is being transported through different transporters and into a storage system, right? Economies of scale. So obviously, if you do it on a big scale, it's going to be much cheaper, right? So economies of scale, and then synergy between multiple CO2 sources and storage operator that can reduce the risk and support commercial viability, right? So when I was in Norway, there was this longship project going on, and the plan was that they will capture the CO2 from cement units and other industries in Norway, and then they will transport it to this place um, in Norway, and where you have these huge storage systems or transportation systems available to transport this CO2 to the sea, and 1,000 meter below in the Sleipner formation, you can store it. So geological storage resources, like I said, Sleipner reservoir, you can store there, and the industries would be attracted. When you have a system in place, and they don't have to set up the whole thing, they don't have to invent the wheel. They feel inclined. Okay, let's just join the team already existing, and then that would be cheaper for us. So that's what the government can do. Now, as far as the R&D is concerned, we talk about DAC, right? So how does it work? There's a large fan which draws the air from the atmosphere. So the air which has all the carbon dioxide, that is drawn in, and there are filters which contain engineered chemicals, right? And you concentrate them into the carbon dioxide, and then the filter material is heated to release the captured CO2. So you have a bottled high pressure carbon dioxide available, and that is pumped in into the reservoirs. So that is how we store it. Okay. So there are different kind of technologies when we talk about seekers. So DAC is there, of course, to capture. Then there is oxy-fuel combustion, where you have a lot of oxygen and you burn the fuel with all that oxygen, so that the CO2 produces very little, actually. Then there are chemical solvents which can capture the carbon dioxide. Then there is pre-combustion CO2 process and CO2 separation from pressurized gas. These are technologies, right, which are available to us. And in terms of storage, we have talked about this a lot of times, the word sequestration. You capture the carbon, inject in the reservoirs, in aquifers, or in basalt reservoirs and all, and those geological formations would store them, right? Then there is utilization. How are you going to utilize it? You're going to have EOR, which is enhanced oil recovery. You have plastics, fertilizers industry. You can use that carbon dioxide in road construction as well. Today, India has a very dynamic minister of roads, and we are making a lot of roads almost every day. And the CO2 can be raw material for roads, and there's of course a lot of processing which will go there. And carbon trade and credits, we'll discuss that in a minute. Yeah. So storage in geological formations. This is Sleipner A, where I worked in Norway, and you inject that carbon dioxide below in the formation in a supercritical CO2, which is like in liquid form, and it's injected directly into the rocks. Okay. So there have been projects in Canada, in Algeria, in Salah project. As a drilling engineer, I worked here as well. So, and we have seen how useful these projects can be. And they can be a guideline for nations like India, who are just establishing the injection projects. So EOR injection is another utilization, where the carbon dioxide is pumped in, and this CO2 kind of, it displaces the miscible oil, and this carbon dioxide stays back in the rock, and the oil is moved up and you produce it. So it's an excellent use of carbon dioxide in oil and gas industry. Enhances your production. And there are fields of cane in Rajasthan in India where your technology has been successfully used. Now we talk about carbon funding, financial mechanism. So we have been talking about it during this presentation. There is what we call carbon credit trading scheme. So having a market where you can trade carbon credit, that has been on the anvil for a long time, but it has not yet been implemented. Hopefully, it would be implemented in the near future, very near future. And once that is there, then you can manage the carbon credits much more efficiently, like China does it today, or the European Union is doing today. You can go to EU CTS, there's a huge website there, and they have implemented this technology successfully. And there's a lot to learn from them. And then renewable energy certificates, these are already in place. So if you are using energy which has been derived from renewable sources, yeah, then you get renewable energy certificates. So these certificates can also be got if you are capturing the carbon and dumping it in the reservoir. So you get those certificates. And perform, achieve, and trade scheme. This is a government thing, more of Prime Minister's slogan, where he says that you must incentivize entities that beat their mandatory energy efficient targets. So you set a target, and if somebody does more than that, then you reward them, and that can be implemented for seekers. Likewise, you have voluntary green credit program, and it encourages environmentally positive activities like afforestation, waste management, and sustainable agriculture. Um, and then there is this Atal Jyoti Yojana, which can promote carbon financing. So some ways by which India can help carbon funding. Yeah. And then, socioeconomic impact. So if you bring in a policy, will that have a social and economic impact? What we have seen is if you reduce the greenhouse gas emissions, that can really benefit the economy. Like in the Kyoto Protocol, there's something called CDM, clean um, drive mechanism, whereby the rich nations or the global north nations, they spend money, you know, uh, in a developing nation to buy to gain credits for investing in technologies so that they can capture carbon and utilize it in say in India. So there is this thing is going there for almost more than a decade now. ONGC is one company which has been, you know, capturing carbon dioxide from its activities. Indian Oil Corporation is one. They are also extracting carbon dioxide from the refineries. And then there is always a plan to sequestrate this CO2 in place. And you can see it says, for example, the global economy benefited by $648 billion in the first half of 2020 due to a reduction in CO2 emission. So that carbon which was just being emitted is now having a tag, a price tag to it, $648 billion. That's a lot of money, guys. And if you can get that benefited, why not, right? It must make sense for the business to invest there. And here is the sense. Food prices. So what happens if you have climate change? If there's a huge hurricane coming in, it's going to damage the city and your crops, right? So what is going to happen? You should expect that the food prices will go up because of that disruption. So it impacts the food prices. And then there can be socioeconomic factors like human development. Do you think if you have a AQI of 500 for 1 month, people will have normal lungs? Human development would be challenged there, right? Economy and lifestyle. So if you are going to be conscious, your lifestyle will change. You will not be buying a generator which produces a lot of CO2, because then grab 4, the regulation, that will be effective in Delhi. And because of that, you will be penalized by the government. So your lifestyle will change. You will go for environmentally safe and prudent decisions, policies, and institutions. Now, CCUS policy is not something which is India's brainchild. It is something which has been fed by international conventions of which India is a signatory. So your policies are being affected. You are coming up with new institutions to govern these policies. And so I recommended that there should be an independent regulator for seekers, right? So, which can enable the technology, which can see the implementation go through swiftly and softly, right, in the nation. Technology. Which technology would you support? If there is direct air capture in Delhi, that would be great, right? um, an environmental and natural resource. So your resources get used up if you are, for example, oil and gas. You're producing too much oil and gas, what will happen? You're going to burn all that. And if you burn it, you are having a higher carbon footprint. So all this is kind of interrelated, should I say. And so we can conclude today in this presentation that the government should come up with a policy to incentivize, somehow the CCUS policy and implement it. And to implement, these are the challenges. Establish institutional framework and a business model which should be uh, competitive locally. And there's a lot to learn from those countries who have successfully implemented CCUS model. Support to CCUS technologies in R&D. So Indian Institute of Technologies, where you have so much of research going on, the government should give this task to them so that they can come up with technologies which are really cost effective. Encouragement to comprehensive CCUS cluster framework. So the government should come up with a framework which is aligned to the needs of the nation in terms of carbon capture, carbon utilization, and carbon storage. So we have, for example, for storage, there is this Mumbai High offshore field in India, on the western coast, which are huge reservoirs, and these are basaltic reservoirs. So basalt is a strong rock, and if you pump something below the basalt, it's not going to come out forever, and this carbon dioxide can be trapped there forever. So you have to be locally prudent and come up with solutions which are going to help India. And we just saw socioeconomic impact. And what would be the impact? It will really get more jobs, increase your GDP and all. So that's pretty much it. These are the references I have used. And thank you very much. I'm open for questions. In fact, let me see. There's a question here. No, nothing really. Right. So, anybody who would like to ask me a question on seekers, feel free to ask now. Hello. Anybody there?
Yes, someone from participants, if you have any doubts, please ask.
Very well. Then I think we are done with this webinar. And thank you very much for showing your presence. Back to you, Advantage.
Yes, thank you very much, sir, for the webinar.
Thank you.
I
You
hope
all
so.
have a nice evening.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Bye now.